Hi guys, it's Amy and welcome to the channel or welcome back. I hope that you're doing well. Let me know how you're doing in the comments. Today we are talking about the books that I read in the month of March, and it was a really good reading month for me. I had some really solid reads. I even had a couple of 5 stars, which I'm really excited to talk about. But definitely let me know in the comments what you read this month, but let's get into this list. My first read of the month was an ARC that I received, and that is Homegrown Magic by Jamie Pacton and Rebecca Podos. This was a little bit new for me. This is a cozy romantasy. I haven't really read any cozy, specifically romantasy books before, and this is a queer romance, and it was actually really good. I really enjoyed it. It was definitely a bit spicy for me. I tend to just kind of skip over the spice, but it is definitely a spicier book as far as my tastes go. But this was really enjoyable, and I really loved the romance between the characters. So we are following our main character, Margot. She is a plant witch, and she's trying to help save the future of her small country town. And then we have Yale, and they are a noble heir that is kind of running away from their responsibilities and duties, and they end up running to the town where Margot lives. And so they kind of are like estranged childhood friends. And so they kind of rekindle their friendship and things kind of grow from there. But there's a lot going on in this book, and I felt like it really made the romance kind of come alive in the story. So there are just some really well developed conflicts in this story. We're dealing with family issues, financial issues, duty, responsibility driven issues. And all of these things are kind of trying to tear our main characters apart. But I feel like, again, that really just makes the romance feel much more real and grounded. And it's all within this kind of lush, like spring sort of world. So I feel like it's perfect for this time of year. And we're definitely dealing with like flowers and herbs and plants. And it just was the perfect time to read this book. But this is definitely a romantasy, and like I said, it definitely has some spice in it. But I felt like the chemistry between the characters was still really well built, and there was tension, but also a lot of tenderness to the romance as well. So don't think that it was just a romance predicated on spice. I'm not really particularly for that, but I just felt like this was a really grounded romance, and I really enjoyed seeing the progression of the relationship. Now, this may not be for everyone just because of some of the tropes that are in it. We do have like the third act breakup, and there is some lack of communication in here, miscommunication. So if those things would deter you, I don't know if I would recommend this. But if you want something that is a cozy kind of fantasy romance, I would definitely recommend this, and especially for the queer representation. I gave this 3.5 stars. I think this is a really solid read and a really cozy book for the springtime. My next read was one that was highly anticipated, and that is Oathbound by Tracy Dion. That is the third book of the Legendborn cycle, and this is a fantastic YA urban fantasy series. And if you are not familiar with it, we are following our main character, Bree, a 16-year-old who gets accepted into a special program at the University of North Carolina. And when she starts, she ends up witnessing something that is really strange and magical, and she gets pulled into this secret society that has magic that's very Arthurian legend based. And it is just a really original magic system and world, and really fascinating story that brings in really important topics like racism and systemic oppression. And I feel like Dion deals with it in a really nuanced and very relatable way. But looking at this third book, I feel like Dion just really expanded this world and went deeper with our characters. She built more into the magic system. There's actually kind of two magic systems dueling within this story, but I don't want to give too much away about that. But I just feel like we went so much deeper with the story, and we are getting additional POVs in this third book. Previously, we've only had Bree, our main character's POV, but now we are getting multiple characters, and I really feel like Dion went just full in with these side characters. I feel like everyone, even as they're spread out across the story, that they all brought something important to the story, and I feel like Everyone was just really well fleshed out. I didn't feel like anyone was looked over as far as what they're contributing, and I just really appreciated that character work. This series is just really gripping and thought provoking. It can be emotionally intense, but it is just so fantastic. I think this is really some top notch YA, and even if you're not a YA reader, I would still recommend it because it's just such an original fantasy. And this was definitely a 5 star for me. I absolutely loved it, and I cannot wait to see what Dion continues to do with this world. My next read was actually our book club read, the appendix over on the Fable app. And if you want to join us in the month of April, we are starting The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. It is a fantastic Sherlock, like sci-fi fantasy. And this is just a fantastic like fantasy with a mystery plot to it. I highly, highly recommend it. And this will be a reread for me, and I'm really excited to do that. But in March, our read was Shield Maiden by Sharon Emeriches. So this story is like a Beowulf inspired fantasy, and we're following our main character, Frida, who is a young woman who is the daughter of a noble. She is actually King Beowulf's niece, and she is having to navigate political issues and family issues, and it's all done within kind of this intimate story as we're examining her and the relationships she has with other people. So this story wasn't totally what I expected. I think I was expecting something more like the original Beowulf story, which I think is a bit more intense and just kind of like an epic as far as storytelling goes. Which, if you're not familiar with Beowulf, it's this ancient British kind of fantastical story about a hero facing 3 different challenges. And we actually are kind of basing the story on one of those challenges, which includes a dragon. So if you like a dragon story, you might enjoy this. But this was a much more like intimate sort of story. And even though it wasn't what I expected, I actually still really enjoyed it. And I really loved seeing kind of the dynamics between Frida, our main character, and her friends and even love interest, the conflict she has with family. It was just, I keep going back to the word intimate. It just had a very intimate feel to it. And I actually really enjoyed that aspect of it. I think my favorite was Frida and her romantic interest, Theo's relationship. It was just this really like heartwarming romance, and it was just very like genuine and pure, and I really loved that aspect of it. But we're dealing with some kind of intense political dynamics. There's definitely betrayal in here. There's definitely violence. I felt like, as far as the prose, like it felt a little bit YA, and then we would have like these intense, very much like mature content moments of violence. There's even some sexual harassment and things like that. So there were definitely some more like adult moments in here, and I felt like sometimes the writing didn't quite match the maturity of some of the elements. So other than that, I feel like this was a really solid story, but I do have that slight criticism to it. But I just feel like this was a really great kind of sort of Viking kind of story, Norse sort of story. It definitely had that vibe to it. We're kind of in this fortress of this noble, and all of these people are coming to celebrate, come together, and all of these different political tensions start coming to the surface and creating a lot of conflict. And I don't want to give too much away about the dragon aspect of it, but I really loved kind of these sections of the story that included kind of the dragon's perspective and bringing in kind of parts of the original legends and things like that. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. So it was definitely an interesting writing style. And this is very much kind of like a historical fantasy. It definitely is very atmospheric, and I enjoyed that aspect of it as well. But it's very character driven. And if you like that kind of story, I think that you would enjoy this. This was a 3.5 for me. I think this is really solid. I would still recommend it to people. I just wasn't a huge fan of the kind of more YA tone of some of the writing, but I feel like it was still well balanced with like battles and conflicts and the betrayals and political machinations and things like that. So still would definitely recommend. I think March was the month of highly anticipated reads for me. I had 3 books that I was just really looking forward to, and this next one was one of them, and that is Somewhere Beyond the Sea by TJ Klune. this is the sequel to The House in the Cerulean Sea, which is a book that I absolutely loved. It is a cozy fantasy that is about an orphanage where this orphanage is hosting magical beings, magical children, and our main character, Linus, goes as a social worker to kind of investigate what's going on within this orphanage, and he ends up just falling in love with the family and the caretaker. It's very much a found family kind of story. So this is kind of the continuation of that story. And so we have our kids that I just absolutely love. They're all different magical creatures. And then we have our main caretaker, Arthur, who is the one that was overseeing the orphanage. And now Linus is definitely a part of that family and helping take care of the kids as well. So this was just a really great continuation of the story. This is very much about love and acceptance and seeing that even if people are different from you, you can still love and accept them and appreciate them, and that you don't have to be afraid of someone who's different from you. And I really loved how we were bringing in like how the government is trying to control these magical beings and how people see things and how they should think. And I definitely appreciate TJ Klune exploring those things. I do feel like in this book, he was a bit more heavy handed with the themes. I feel like he was more subtle and delicate with it in the first book, but I still really enjoyed this book. We had the fantastic characters that just really make the story heartwarming and tug on the heartstrings as well. The kids are absolutely hilarious. It is just kind of like lovable chaos. And they all just have such great personalities. And the first book I read the physical, I wanted to read the second book as audio because I've heard really great things about the narrator, and they are absolutely right what they say about this audiobook. The narrator, his name escapes me. I'll put it here on the screen for you. But he just did so great. He just brought so much energy to the story and did different voices for the different characters and just really brought it to life. I really enjoyed it. So if you're looking for a good audiobook, I know he did the first and second book, so definitely would recommend listening to it. So this story is definitely exploring important topics like queer representation and acceptance, and definitely looking at like governmental control and definitely creating a narrative and using propaganda in order to create control. But I feel like it's done in just a really heartwarming context in this fantastical story. And even though I gave this a 4.5 rather than a 5 star like I did the first book, I feel like it was just, again, slightly heavy handed with some of the themes. But I feel like overall it was just revisiting a world that I really enjoyed, and I had a really great time with this book. So I still definitely recommend it and highly recommend this series because there is going to be a third book coming out. I saw a talk with DJ Klune where he said he is working on the third book. So if you're wanting a cozy fantasy series, this would definitely be one to read. My next read was one that was a little bit out of my comfort zone. We're kind of dealing with historical fiction, but kind of like a fictionalized memoir, and that is The Queen of Sugar Hill by Rashonda Tate. So this is the fictionalized look at the life of Hattie McDaniel, who was the first Black person to ever win an Oscar, and she won it for her role as Mammy in Gone with the Wind. And I know there's some controversy around that movie and that role. At the time, that was what was available to her as far as parts, and this book definitely explored that part of Hollywood. But this was looking at her life from when she won the Oscar to the end of her life, and it touches a little bit on her past as well. But this was very much looking at her career post winning her Oscar. This story is taking place primarily in the 1940s, going into the 1950s. And again, this is post winning her Oscar, but this is definitely exploring racism within Hollywood at the time. And it is done in a really nuanced way because Hattie McDaniel was very much criticized for her role as Mammy, even by the Black community. It was just very interesting looking at how she was trying to navigate being an actor and wanting to promote other fellow Black actors, but how she struggled even with the Black community as well. And it was just a really interesting look at a very interesting person. Again, this was fictionalized, and the author noted at the end some of the kind of liberties that they took in order to just kind of help the story flow better. But it was looking at the different relationships that she had, her career, and definitely her being a very strong and resilient person, but also a flawed person at the same time. Again, she was very resilient. She was very kind, but she also had a lot of hardship that she dealt with. Again, with facing racism and then backlash from her own community. And she also had a lot of issues with her romantic relationship. She had multiple marriages, and it was all fraught with a lot of difficulty and just heartbreak. But she, again, was just a very resilient person. But it was definitely showing a very human story. And I felt like it was just very relatable in that she was going through struggles. And even though she was seen as this major actress, she was friends with Clark Gable and different jazz musicians and these different famous actors. And even though she was the queen of Sugar Hill, which was apparently this predominant neighborhood in LA, she still struggled. She had a lot of issues that she was having to deal with. And I really just enjoyed getting to see a very real and genuine look at someone who maybe doesn't have as much of her story out. We think of like the golden age of Hollywood and people like Clark Gable and other people she was rubbing elbows with, like Betty Davis. Like their stories are very much known. But Black actors like Hattie McDaniel, I feel like her story is not known as much. And I think a lot of that came from the struggle she had with even just getting hired, because even though she won an Oscar, it took a long time for her to start getting hired again. And she was getting pigeonholed into kind of a stereotype as far as the roles that she would get. It was like the servant, the housekeeper, that sort of thing. So she was getting very much typecasted. And it was just seeing that struggle was very compelling and emotional and difficult to hear. And I definitely felt like I was had my eyes open to a part of history that I wasn't as familiar with, seeing the racism within Hollywood at the time. And I feel like this was a really good look into that. I wasn't a huge fan of the writing style of this. I felt like there were some moments that felt kind of rushed and glossed over, and then some moments were very detailed, so I felt like there was just some inconsistencies. But overall, I felt like it was a really compelling look at a very interesting person's life. So if you like kind of a memoir, even if it is a fictionalized take, I think that you would really enjoy this. If you like historical fiction, if you like classic like Hollywood from like the 1940s, I think you would definitely enjoy this, and especially looking at the topic of racism within Hollywood. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, I would definitely recommend this. I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars, so definitely a solid read. My next read was definitely my favorite of the month, and I literally just finished it very recently, and that is A Drop of Corruption by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is the sequel to The Tainted Cup, which is a Sherlock and Watson sort of inspired fantasy story. It's like a fantasy take on the Sherlock Watson mystery dynamic. And this is a very much like sci-fi fantasy inspired world. But I loved the first book, and I think I might have loved the second book even more. So this book is coming out April 1st of this year, so literally the day after I'm posting this. And I received this thankfully as an ARC, and I was so thankful because I absolutely loved it. And again, this is a Sherlock inspired fantasy, but we're definitely getting it from the Watson character's perspective. So our main characters are Anna, who is our main investigator, our Sherlock character, and then Din, who is kind of our Watson character. Somehow Bennett just took the story to a new level, and we went kind of deeper with the world building. And we definitely have a lot of like political intrigue. We have corruption. We definitely have our mystery. We definitely have like a murder mystery going on. And it is creepy. It is eerie. It was definitely like putting me on the edge of my seat. I had to know what was going to happen next. I literally binged this within a couple of days, and it was just so fantastic. It really blew me away. I think one of the things I appreciated most about this story was how the partnership between Anna and Din was taken a little bit deeper as far as their relationship dynamic. And it was just so unexpected, but really like heartwarming at the same time and really compelling. But the main focus is definitely solving this mystery, and it is definitely high stakes. We're dealing with some really interesting sci-fi kind of magic. It definitely feels a bit more sci-fi, but we're dealing with a world that is like surrounded by these oceans filled with these leviathan beasts, and they're kind of using these leviathans like once they die to kind of create different magical concepts, different trying to further the science and magic of the world. It just creates a lot of interesting controversy and tension. And we also have this great empire where our investigators are kind of working for this empire. They are like government officials, part of the military, and they are investigating a murder that is related to a country that is trying to be taken over by the empire. So we have a lot of interesting political dynamics and tensions, and it definitely adds to the mystery. I feel like Bennett just did a really good job at like balancing the mystery, the murder aspect, the sci-fi magic, and the political intrigue going on. It was all just balanced really well, and I was taking notes after each chapter because I want to be able to read this with our book club in the future. And I just remember finishing chapters and being like, oh my God, like just having those kind of jaw dropping moments and saying, like, that was some of the most incredible writing. Just the way that he used all these different details and tied everything together. I was just really impressed. And I'm not really one to be able to predict things easily within stories. There were definitely hints towards like some of the reveals within the story and the mystery, but even though maybe they felt kind of guessable, I still feel like the reveals still had like a really good impact and punch to them. So nothing was taken away from it as far as me kind of like, oh, okay, I kind of see a hint about that here and there, but I don't really know where we're going. So it definitely like keeps you on your toes and you don't know what's going to happen next. This definitely is an adult fantasy. We definitely have violence, we have language. There's alluding to spice. There's not like actual spice that I recall, but there's definitely alluding to it. There's language, and there's definitely body horror in here. Definitely body horror, and kind of some psychological thriller moments as well. So it's an intense story, but I feel like it's still really fun at the same time. We still have like witty banter between Din and Anna and some of the other side characters. There's some really good side characters in here as well. There's just all across the board like 5 stars for me. The plot, the characters, the mystery, just everything. I absolutely love this book. I think it's probably going to be one of my favorite books of the year. And we're only in March. So I am really excited to see where Bennett takes the rest of this story. I definitely feel like we're going to be going deeper with the next book, but I cannot wait for the next one. And I can't wait to read The Tainted Cup again with our book club over on Fable. Okay, guys, that is everything that I read in the month of March. Let me know if you read any of these and what you thought about them, or if any of my reviews piqued your interest and you want to read them. And definitely let me know what your favorite read was this month. And if you got to the end of the video, leave me a sun emoji in the comments. We're in spring, the sun is coming out, the temperatures are warming up. Leave me a sun or a flower to let me know that you got to the end of the video. And thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys soon. Bye!